First off, it's all about the U. Let's talk about the 11th part of the 12-part video series. We'll talk about our final regular season home game on November 21st, and the opponent being the Duke Blue Devils. When you think of the Duke Blue Devils, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is their basketball team. Of course, Mike Krzyzewski and the Final Fours and 3 national championships. But that's slowly starting to change in Durham. With David Cutcliffe there now, they're starting to show some toughness. And Cut is instilling a winning attitude up in Durham. Now, I say if you give Cut another 2 years, maybe 3, they'll be competing for ACC Coastal Division titles. This is a team on the rise, and few would have ever believed that. Especially what Cut did at Ole Miss. He turned that program and made them a winner. Now, offensively, they do lose their best receiver in Riley, but they do have Lewis coming back at quarterback and another pretty good receiver in Johnny Williams. They do have 2 pretty good tight ends in King and Huffman that could do some real damage, especially in the passing game, which is going to be spreading the ball a lot more this year. However, they do have a young offensive line. They do lose 2 key players from last year in Rowland and Goldberg. All they really returned there are Hill and Morgan. Overall, they returned just 4 starters from last year's 4 and 18. The running game will get a shot in the arm with the return of their leading rusher back in 2006 and 2007 in Boyette. Also, they have a back that Cut thinks can really step up and deliver key yards for them in Scott. They do have 2 other good backs in Hollingsworth and Jackson, with Jackson being a converted safety. And their running game needs to be better because last year, let's look at this stat, and it's telling. They averaged just 106 yards a game rushing. That's not very good. Now, defensively, they have a lot of question marks, especially in first quarters of games, because that's where their opponents outscored them 78-48. Their secondary is weak, especially against the run, and to emphasize this point, Duke's rush defense last year allowed 151.5 yards a game. Their D-line loses their best pass rusher from a year ago in Akinbini, but they do return 5 starters here from last year's team. One of those is Okobasi, who some think is going to be a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. He's one we will have to account for from a CANES perspective. Why? He's 6'6", 300 pounds, and he beats double teams constantly. I mean, our low line will have his work cut out for us. We will have our work cut out trying to stop him. Last year, to emphasize that, he had 51 tackles, 9 of those for losses, and 6 sacks. Their other D lineman that gets overlooked here is Rucker. Now that's a player with our O-lineman double teaming Okobasi that can really be a star in his senior year. And their ends are pretty damn good too, and Ogles being an Okpo Warnock, whatever his name is. Yeah, I'm bad with names, so please forgive me with that. At the linebacker spot, yes, they lose Taluli in the middle, but they still have a potent leader in Ray who had over 100 tackles a year ago. In fact, 109 of those to be exact, and 10.5 of those were for losses. He had 2 sacks, a pick, and recovered 2 fumbles for touchdowns. They have a linebacker who their coaches think could be just as good as Ray in Banks. And he's 6'4", 230 pounds, and their coaches and their staff up there in Durham think he has the potential to be a very special player there before it's over. Now, the secondary, as I said, their weakest link, and they're not physical. Yes, their safeties are good, however, their cornerbacks aren't. Against the pass, they constantly give up the big play. Last year, they gave up 13.7 yards per completion, and their opposing quarterbacks threw an average of 7.8 yards per attempted throw. So I think we can have a field day against the Duke secondary and against the defense. And if we give Ja'Cory time, it could get real ugly for the Blue Devils. Really ugly. Special teams wise, their kicking game is solid with the return of Maggio, their kicker, and Jones, their punter. Their return game, though, is very suspect. Their punt coverage, however, was rock solid. They only allowed less than 6 yards per punt return last year, and that's impressive. However, their kickoff coverage was pathetic. Horrible. But they're slowly getting better there. But I think, especially from a CANES perspective, we can win the battle. I think we're going to win the battle of field position. And I think we're going to do a lot of. We may return 1 or 2 to the house. So this is one I think we can do a lot of damage against. Now the offense, I rate them a 6, defense 6.5, special teams 7. Overall, I'll say about a 7. Surprisingly, Duke's going to be a pretty tough opponent, but I think we're just going to have too many weapons. Cut's about another, say, 2 years away from being really, really competitive here. Look at Duke this year. They were 4-8 a year ago. I could see them maybe going to a bowl game. I could see them being maybe 6-6 or 7-5 this year. I'm going to probably go 6-6 for the Blue Devils in 2009. They're not going to have a losing record. I think Cut's got them in the right direction. And I think, like I said, give them another 2-3 years, they're going to be very, very dangerous. Well, that's it on Duke and the ACC. Now we're going to talk about USF in the next video, which is the final part of the 12-part series. And as always, go Canes.